Let's dive into what's happening in the healthcare space and why with Rick Jackson, who is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Jackson Healthcare, the third largest healthcare staffing company in the United States, with over 3,000 U.S. hospitals that it staffs with clinicians and treating 10 million patients annually. He has a great piece that was in Newsweek in the last week or two. And also, he is a member of the Job Creators Network. Rick Jackson, welcome to the show. Good to have you today.
Thank you, Jimmy. Glad to be with you.
I'm so pleased to have you because we really need to highlight what's been going on in the healthcare space. Give us a 50,000-foot view, and then we'll dive right in.
All right, great. Well, first of all, I think that when you watch TV all the time, all of us are sitting home and so forth, and most of what has dominated the news is what's happening in New York and the bad places and so forth, and the trauma that they're going through. And it's very real, and it's, obviously there's a concern for that. But what that does is give the perception that this is happening in all hospitals and everywhere in the United States, and it's just simply not true. The facts are that at least 90% of the hospitals are half empty right now. They don't have a lot of the COVID patients. They don't have these problems because we're only glamorizing. Unfortunately, the news drives ratings and so forth because if it bleeds, it leads. And so we're only focusing on just the negative, and we're focusing on it 24/7. So this is given that perception that the hospitals are just covered in COVID-19 patients. This came about because the government has restricted elective and outpatient procedures. We're not talking about elective like getting plastic surgery on your nose or something like that. We're talking about brain surgery that can be delayed for 30 or 60 days, total knees, all kind of treatment and so forth. None of the doctor's offices here in Georgia are even open right now. So 70% of people are not even going to see their regular physicians and getting regular treatment and so forth. And most people don't know this. This is surprising to me because I'm in healthcare, that almost 20% of the entire GDP is in healthcare. That's $3.6 trillion a year. It's $10 billion a day. And right now, this is a self-inflicted wound by basically shutting down healthcare except for the treatment of COVID patients and just dire emergencies and so forth. We're basically losing today about $3 billion a day of the economy based under just healthcare alone.
I was just going to say, as you point out in your op-ed for Newsweek, Rick, 43,000 healthcare workers lost their jobs in the first month of this crisis.
Yeah, I think it's actually more than that. That was before, like Mayo Clinic, just last week, starting May 1, furloughed 30,000 people. You don't furlough 30,000 people if your hospital is full and you need them for COVID-19 or anything else. And so I would say right now, my guesstimate is probably closer to 500,000 people have been furloughed in healthcare, which is the last place we need it right now. And, and what that does is I got to tell you my biggest concern of that. First of all, by watching TV and so forth, it scares people from going to their doctor and to healthcare. And I get it, but that's because it's so slanted on just those issues. But here's my biggest concern. As a healthcare provider, we're going to have patients that are victims of COVID-19 that have never gotten the virus. There are people today, let me give you an example. There's a saying in the hospital, it's called code gray. You've heard of code red and some of these other things, code blue. Well, this is code gray. These are the people that show up at the hospital dead. They're dead on arrival. That has gone up 50% in the hospitals I've surveyed just in the last 30 days. So people are staying away from necessary treatment and so forth because they're scared of going to the hospital, going to their doctor and so forth. And I'm more concerned about the deaths that's going to cause by us not having these hospitals open.
Yeah, when you talk with the clinicians that you work with in terms of the staffing operations that Jackson Healthcare does? What are they telling you? Because it seems completely logical that what you're saying about the social fallout and the other healthcare issues that people are enduring is a direct result of these government policies that have just said, no, you can't do elective surgery, you can't do other treatments that people may be needing for a variety of different issues. And I mean, I could just imagine when things do fully reopen, God willing, sooner than later, that there will be such an influx of patients because they will have been so tied up with staying at home and not able to seek the treatment that you will suddenly have an overloading of the healthcare system, but you will also have maybe some issues that developed that wouldn't have otherwise developed if they'd sought treatment sooner.
Well, it's a great point. For instance, I've got a friend of mine whose wife had a mammogram in January, and she had a lump in her breast. And so she was scheduled in late February to have a biopsy, which is a very difficult time when you're worried about things like that. Right. Well, her appointment was canceled, and she still, as of today, has not gotten an appointment to have a biopsy. And I can't imagine, as you know, in cancer, the sooner you can get to it and identify it, the better the outcome is. And so you have this in spades everywhere. I do think there's a pent-up demand for surgery that was already scheduled for the last 30 or 60 days and some of those kind of things. At first, when this first happened, I thought this was just going to be a mad rush. As soon as they turn on the hospitals, they're going to be overflooded by regular, hospital needs and so forth like that. I think it's going to take a little bit more than that, more time. It's easier to shut down hospital services than it is to ramp them back up. But hospitals will do it professionally. The biggest issue right now is psychological. In my mind, we have to have our healthcare going 100% on all 8 cylinders, because if my doctor won't see me for a routine checkup, and that they're delaying and canceling that meeting, it kind of, as a consumer, doesn't make me feel very confident about going to the restaurant. And so we have to get that nailed and get it out as soon as possible so that we can build the confidence, psychological confidence, that we can solve this problem and feel safe in this COVID environment.